You're never going to see Bitcoin in one of these complaints because Bitcoin's different than these other cryptocurrencies. It's leaderless, it's decentralized, it doesn't have a founding team, it doesn't have these regulatory risks. So perhaps we're seeing some capital flow out of these cryptocurrencies that do have regulatory risk and into the king, into Bitcoin.
Gensler is being pretty direct in what he's saying, and it seems a lot more dangerous right now to be betting on crypto capitalists than it is to be betting, say, just on Bitcoin.
The Securities and Exchange Commission is going after two of the biggest crypto exchanges in the world.
As I've often said, it's a Wild West and a bunch of casino operators.
The first lawsuit was a litany of complaints against Binance, controlled by Changpeng Zhao, also known as CZ. Only a day later, Coinbase, the American publicly traded crypto exchange headed by Brian Armstrong, was hit with its own lawsuit from the SEC.
I think the crypto industry more broadly, if it's going to have any success going forward, has to come into compliance with basic public policy about disclosure, about avoiding conflicts, about properly segregating customer funds and guarding against fraud and manipulation. Without that, this whole area stands a chance of collapsing like a house of cards.
The numerous allegations brought against each of these companies are not all the same, but the timing and the scope of the charges facing them sends a very clear message. Federal regulators are taking action, and the industry is now under a microscope.
What we have here are two different lawsuits. I would say the Coinbase situation is much more about what is a security and what is not, as opposed to the Binance situation, which is really about charges of fraud, commingling of funds, and efforts to evade.
Binance and CZ are facing the most serious charges, including claims that Binance commingled customer funds and traded against customers through a pair of market-making firms also allegedly controlled by CZ.
Binance has been raising eyebrows really since it came on the scene since 2017 with its questionable business practices, really. Everything from how they raise money through their ICO, to certain tokenomics associated with that token, the BNB token, how they listed tokens on their platforms, the jurisdictional arbitrage, where they held their headquarters is very secretive. And they tried to kind of avoid regulators by being secretive around that. So all those things combined just raised a lot of eyebrows. And some of the revelations that occurred in the SEC complaint were pretty shocking even for me.
In the crypto space, it's largely built on a business model that's non-compliant with the securities laws. People are commingling all of the customer funds. It would be as if the New York Stock Exchange is also operating a hedge fund and trading against their customers.
In addition to complaints related to these questionable business practices, the lawsuit also quotes an email that suggests the compliance team at Binance was fully aware of what they were at the time getting away with.
Quote, in one instance, the Binance chief compliance officer messaged a colleague that we are operating as a effing unlicensed security exchange in the USA, bro. I think that is really, really funny.
They were charged with misleading investors due to lack of controls and surveillance and performing market manipulation on their platform through trading firms that were owned and controlled by the Binance CEO, CZ. That is a really serious allegation. These are nefarious activities where they took customer funds, commingled them without their knowledge, and then traded on the platform, oftentimes against them. So those are really shocking revelations and a lot more serious than, say, the Coinbase charges that we'll certainly get into as well.
While the Coinbase allegations are arguably milder, some say the implications could represent an existential threat to the company's business model.
Coinbase's complaint is really around being an unregistered exchange broker and clearinghouse, as well as their staking as a service program with some of these proof of stake tokens, where they would take 5 of these specific coins, stake them on behalf of the investors, and then they would reward them with a reward and then take a little commission on the side. And that has been deemed a security by the SEC, but it hasn't been registered. So not as much nefarious activities like Binance, but the SEC came after them nonetheless.
The crux of the issue is whether many of the crypto tokens listed on the exchanges are securities that need to be registered. And based on the Howey test, a long recognized set of criteria for determining what makes a security, they are.
I don't feel like there's a clear rule book. The only sort of high-level statements they've made is that everything other than Bitcoin is a security.
The Howey test is that old law of how people determine what is and what isn't a security. Is there an investment of money? Is it in a common enterprise? Is there an expectation of profit? And is it derived from the efforts of others?
There are things about cryptocurrencies that bother the regulators more than Bitcoin. But there's things about Bitcoin that still bother the regulators because it's still removing their ability to control monetary policy and have people hedge against inflation.
Bitcoin is unique in several ways, which sets it apart as a commodity and therefore outside the purview of the SEC.
Bitcoin is too big to fail, but in a positive way. It's not because there's someone that's going to bail it out. It's that there's so many people that believe in it and are part of what we're all building that I've never been more bullish.
What do you want to own? You want to own the apex property in cyberspace that's universally desirable to everybody.
You're never going to see Bitcoin in one of these complaints because Bitcoin's different than these other cryptocurrencies. It's leaderless, it's decentralized, it doesn't have a founding team, it doesn't have these regulatory risks. So perhaps we're seeing some capital flow out of these cryptocurrencies that do have regulatory risk and into the king, into Bitcoin.